Hi, hello to everyone. Thank you very much for joining this masterclass. Today we are going to speak with a really interesting topic that is sugar in pastry. Welcome for all the people that you already follow our masterclasses. And let's go to start. Today I'm going to explain the function of sugars in pastry. With our team we prepared a really interesting presentation that I'm sure that you already have in your email. And this presentation starts a little bit about healthy parameters that we need to understand about sugar. Okay, as you know, our philosophy is to work in healthier, lighter, and tastier recipes. Always is our focus when we create recipes from scratch with our big concept method. And for this reason, we find that was important to introduce a little bit of data about how affect sugars in our body. This is just for understand the situation that we have in the sugar, and now I'm going to go deep in the part of what is the function of sugars in pastry. Okay, I'm going just to make an introduction of 20-30 minutes. I'm going to explain a little bit of the function of the sugars. I'm going to explain about the sweetness of the different sugars that we can have in pastry. If you want, we can talk about the substitution of sugar when we want to work with sugar-free recipes. And at the end, we will have time for the questions that you already can share with me, because we have Ramon here in front of me that is going to manage the questions, and I'm going to answer all of them at the end. Okay, let's go to start about sugar. Why sugar is important in pastry? The point is that sugar is a molecule that is in the family of carbohydrates, and the sugars in general can be saccharose, is the most common use, but also we have lactose, we have glucose, we have dextrose. We can find different sugars in pastry. Let's go to focus on sugar. What is the function of sugar, saccharose in pastry? The sugar is going to give us sweetness. No? This is the first thing that we explain in our courses, and is that sugar has the capacity to give us sweetness. This is really important because always in pastry we are trying to find a really good experience in our products, and sweetness is part of the construction of this experience. For this reason, always when we speak about sugars, about sweetness, the sweetness that gives us sugar in the recipes, we have to keep in mind that this sweetness, that is something that I'm going to explain a little bit later, it's interesting to adjust in the recipes. That means that it depends what kind of customers we have, because there is people that they love more sweet pastry. There is, for example, countries and regions in the world that they love to consume less sugar because they are not used to consume products that are not sweet. That means that this parameter, the sweetness, can be adjusted in our recipes. This is something that as I mentioned, I will explain a little bit later. And then different sugars, they have different capacity to give us sweetness in our recipes. Okay? Then sugar, give us dry extract in the recipe. This is really important. Why? Because dry extract is going to build the stability in our recipe. It's also really important, when we freeze and thaw. When we freeze and thaw the recipes, we need to have a minimum of dry extract in order to keep the right stability after the defreezing process. Because if not, sometimes we have, for example, water leaking out, or in the case of creamy textures, for example, we can have grainy textures. And sometimes this is for the problem that comes from not enough dry extract in our recipes. For this reason, also sugars works in that direction. They work on the construction of the stability, and they give us dry extract in the recipes. Then also sugar is a preservative. We've been using in the history of pastry sugar as a preservative because it has the capacity to preserve the product and keep the bacteria's control in order to don't let them to grow up too fast. Okay, that means that sugar also works on the shelf life of the products. Then also sugar, as we know, we already know, participates in the caramelization, because always in sugar, when we have sugar and when we have cooking process, we are going to have caramelization, and this gives us color. That means that we have color in the product, but also caramelization. Also helps us to fix the colors. This is really important, and it's we can see when we start to reduce sugar in our recipes that sometimes the problem is that the colors, they are not so well fixed, and this sometimes happens because we reduce it too much the sugars. In a place that we can see this in an easy way is when we have frozen purees and we have companies like the one that we are using now, that is Adamant's, that we can see that the colors can be a little bit different of fruit purees that they have sugar added, because the sugar helps us to fix the color. But then this is something that we can adjust in the recipe when we are going to formulate the recipe later. And then also they give us texture, They participate in the texture, sugars in general, that are really important in order to build a really good experience for the customer, okay? That means that big pictures, Big picture of the sugar, sweetness, dry extract, water control. I forget this water control because it has the capacity to catch a water, a molecule of water. It's not like fibers, because the fibers, they have a huge capacity to catch the water. When we speak about sugars, there is a difference between saccharose, glucose, dextrose. They have different abilities to catch the water. But when we move to fibers, they have much more water catchment capacity than sugar. If you want, there is another masterclass that is about inulin and fibers, and you can go to this masterclass in order to understand how we can use fibers in pastry and what is the reaction that they have with the water in comparison with the sugars, okay? Just color, caramelization, then give us texture, and then give us dry extract, okay? Let's go now to explain, because I want to share with you the sweetening capacity of the sugars. Let's go to the next part of the presentation. Here we have the sweetening power, SP, or degree of sweetness. This is the sensation of sweetness that we have in our mouth when we are going to taste a sugar. And this is something, as I mentioned, is something that is really, really interesting to understand, because we can adjust our products to the sweetness that we need for our market. Imagine that I'm going to move in a country that for cultural facts, for example, they don't consume too much sugar, and the sweet products that they have, they are not too sweet. We can use a way to reduce the sweetness by understanding how sweet are the sugars and how sweet is the total of the recipe that I'm working. For example, if I have 20% of sugar in one recipe, I know that sugar saccharose, 1% of sugar give me 1 point of sweetness. That means that this recipe that has 20% of sugar has 20 points of sweetness. If we want to reduce, we know that, imagine that we taste a recipe with 20 sweetness points and we see, wow, this is really sweet, I want to reduce. Okay, be careful, because we want to keep the same percentage of sugar in order to keep the same dry extract in our recipe and to keep the stability. And what we will do, or what we need to do, is just to remove some part of the sugar, for example, in order to reduce the quantity of sugar, but keeping the same dry extract in the recipe, the same quantity of volume, the same percentage, and using another ingredient that can be fibers, for example, in order to keep the stability in the recipe. And also, by doing this, I can reduce, for example, the sweetness point. Here in that part of the presentation that you have, we can see that sucrose is 1 sweetness capacity. In sweetness capacity, that means that 1% of sugar is 1 point of sweetness. Xylitol is similar to this. Then coconut sugar is between 0.9, 1, 1.1. It depends what kind of sugar, how they transform it. The coconut sugar can be a little bit less, a little bit more than sugar. Then we have inverted sugar. Inverted sugar because it's a mix of glucose and fructose. And fructose has high capacity to sweeten the recipes. Inverted sugar is 1.25. And then if we move to honey, in honey we have 1.30 and fructose 1.45. Okay, that means that each sugar that we can use in pastry has different properties, different capacity to give us sweetness in a recipe. Okay, if no, we want to reduce the sweetness in one recipe, as I was explaining. Imagine that we have 20% of sugar and we want to reduce the sweetness, keeping the same structure, the same dry extract in our recipe. I can change a part of this sugar for fiber, for example, or I can change a part of the sugar for glucose. No, glucose is not the healthiest option because it's not the best option about healthy, but it's one possibility that we have in pastry. That means that if I'm going to use, for example, glucose syrup, the capacity, the sweetening capacity is around 0.4, more or less. That means that, for example, if I keep 10% of this 20% of sugar in the recipe, this is going to give me 10 points of sweetness, and if the other 10% of sugar I change for glucose, I'm going to reduce the sweetness. Why? Because this 10% of glucose is going to give me 4 points of sweetness. I'm going just to explain this by writing here. Can we share, Ramon? Yes? Imagine that we have 20% of sugar in one recipe. This can be a sponge, a creamy texture, compote, any kind of recipe in pastry, okay? 20%. 20% sugar, the capacity of sweetness, sweetening power, is 1. 1. Perfect. Okay, that means that 20 multiplied per 1, this gives us 20 sweetness points. Amazing. That means that that recipe that has 20% of sugar give us 20 sweetness points in our recipe. Okay, let's go to see the example that I explained it to you. Imagine that you have 10% of sugar. That is 1 sweetness point. Another time the same. And we have the other 10% that we are going to change for glucose. Just one example. And glucose is around 0.4. Here we will need to check what kind of glucose you are going to use, because each kind of glucose, syrup, powder, it depends. The DA that we have in the glucose can change the sweetness capacity, but in a medium average will be 0.4. Okay? Sweetness points. If we multiply 10 per 1, this is going to give us 10 sweetness points. And then we have 10, this is the sugar, and here we have 10% of glucose that we multiply per 0.4, and we have 4 sweetness points. Okay, that means that in that recipe that we switch glucose, sugar for glucose, we will have 14 sweetness points in total. Look at the difference. Here we have 20, here we have 14. Okay? That means that playing with different sugars, I did just the example of glucose because all of us, we have glucose, Playing with different sugars in one recipe, we can adjust the sweetness. And as I mentioned, this is really interesting in order to adjust the sweetness in the different markets. I don't like glucose because glucose has high glycemic index. For this reason, I don't use too much in my recipes. Always I try to push fibers in order to have the same, but in a healthier way. And for example, I will be using in that recipe, I will be using oligofructose, or I will be using inulin. It depends what kind of recipe is going to be that sugar, and what kind of texture and what kind of stability I need to build in the formulation side of the recipe. But like that, you can see how playing with different sugars, we can adjust the sweetness. Here, the goal was to reduce the sweetness of the product. That means that if, for example, this is a sponge, this is a creamy texture that has 20% of sugar, at the beginning in that recipe we have 20 sweetness points, and then here in the next, when we combine two sugars, what we did was to reduce the sweet sensation, and we have 14. Also here we have to check, because glucose, maybe it depends what kind of recipe is going to react different. For this reason, it depends what kind of sugar we are using in the recipes. We need to understand exactly how they work. No? For example, glucose has sweetening capacity that is 0.4 more or less, but then has anti-crystallization capacity of the sugar. For this reason, in a macaron dough, I cannot do this. Why? Because glucose is going to completely avoid the recrystallization of sugar, and think that macaron, for example, or pavlova, that is recipes that I'm sure that you like to prepare, are recipes that the structure that we will is for the recrystallization of the saccharose sugar that we have inside. And we cannot use glucose, we cannot use fibers, because they avoid the recrystallization of sugar, okay? For this reason, that example can be for a compote, can be for a creamy, can be for mousses. Even maybe we can try in a sponge and see how it reacts in a sponge, okay? I think that here I already explained it, the sweetening properties of the sugar, and just keep in mind that it depends what kind of sugars you are going to use. Each sugar can have a different sweetening properties. Here we shared with you coconut sugar, xylitol, sucrose, inverted sugar, honey, and fructose. Okay. Here we have we can see different types of sugar. We are going to speak about sugarcane. Sugarcane is one of the sugars that we can use in pastry. We can use sugar from beetroot. If we compare the white product, I mean the white sugar, it depends if it comes from sugarcane or it depends if it comes from beetroot. There is no huge difference. That means that in the recipes they are going to work on the same direction that I mentioned. No? The only thing is that all these sugars that are not refined, that are whole sugars, like for example vanilla or whole cane sugar, that they have melasse inside, they can give us the aftertaste that the sugar has, and also the vitamins and minerals that we have inside of them. No? That means that if we compare to use sugar, white sugar in pastry, and use, for example, whole cane sugar or coconut sugar like we have here, the difference will be, for sure, the color for one side, the taste and the aftertaste of the products, and then the vitamins and minerals, okay? And also in some whole sugars, like whole cane sugar and coconut sugar, can change a little bit the structure, For example, coconut sugar is not only saccharose, vitamins and minerals. Coconut sugar, for the process of extraction that they do in the palms, we have a part of saccharose, but also we have a part of glucose and fructose. That means that, just look at this. Sugar. This is saccharose. We have one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. Okay, that means that in sugar we have inside of sugar saccharose we have one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. When we speak about inverted sugar, is because what we do is to cut this connection between these molecules, okay? That means that we have, in inverted sugar, we have glucose and fructose, not saccharose, or we can have a small part of saccharose. For this reason, inverted sugar is interesting because glucose and fructose alone, not together, they have properties of anti-crystallization of the sugar, okay? And for this reason, we use inverted sugar in a lot of recipes like brioche, like, for example, mousse, like compotes, like creamy textures, in order to avoid the recrystallization in sugars. Also, for example, in ice cream, they use also in the same direction in order to avoid the recrystallization of saccharose and lactose, because these sugars, they have the capacity to recrystallize inside of the recipes really fast. In pastry, it's less important. Why? Because in general, the consumption of the products is around 2 degrees, 4 degrees, 10 degrees in positive temperature, and here the sugars cannot recrystallize too much. It takes more time to recrystallize, And in general, when just we defreeze, we consume directly, and we don't have enough time to have this process. Okay, for this reason, in ice cream it's really important, but in pastry, not so important like it is in ice cream. Okay, that means that sugar has glucose and fructose. What's happened with coconut sugar or whole cane sugar? No, if we go to the coconut sugar, we have some molecules that are glucose and fructose, that they are together, okay? Then we have molecules of glucose and molecules of fructose that they are separated. That means that inside of the composition of coconut sugar, it depends on the producer, we can have this kind of a structure, and this can be different percentages, no? Sometimes this can be like 70, 80% of the product, and the rest can be more or less. We can have, like, for example, between glucose and fructose can be between 30, 20%, okay? And then inside of this percentage, we have to count that we have vitamins and minerals, more or less. And sometimes we can have some fibers, but in a really tiny percentage, okay? This I'm going to put here. Not all of them. If you want to check this in coconut sugar or the whole sugar that you use in your recipes, you just check the nutritional facts of your producer, or sometimes we use a food data central. You can check in this web page, Food Data Central, in order to understand the composition of the sugars, because sometimes in this website they give us the composition of different sugars. No? For example, coconut sugar or whole cane sugar, what is the composition? But this, it depends, the producer can change. Okay, let's come back, because I was in what types of sugar there are, no? And here I was explaining that each sugar can have different structure and different properties. Here we come back a little bit on the example that I shared with you with glucose at the beginning. What's happened here? If we have sugar here, without inverted sugar, we have recrystallization process. But when we add glucose and fructose separated like inverted sugar, these molecules alone, they have the ability to avoid the recrystallization of sugar. This is what's happened with coconut sugar. When we use coconut sugar, at the same time that we sweet the recipe, because this is sweet almost like sugar, more or less, okay? We have the capacity, anti-crystallization capacity. Why? Because in the same product, we have a pair of saccharose, and then we have glucose and fructose in different proportions that are free. And these two molecules alone, they help us to avoid the recrystallization of sugar. I'm going to explain a really interesting thing that we have in our recipes. For example, when we prepare pralines, in general, when we prepare in our school, what we do is always we work with whole cane sugar, or we work with coconut sugar. But what's happened? Coconut sugar, this example that has glucose and fructose, when we prepare the praline, it takes a little bit more time. Why? When we are using, because we have the process of, we call praline, the sugar with the nuts. That means that we put water with sugar, we bring until 115 degrees, we add the nuts hot, we just mix, stir in hot process until the sugar recrystallize. And when we have white sugar, this process goes very fast, because there is a moment that water evaporates and saccharose comes back to the real structure. That means that it's sugar recrystallized, but the only thing is that it's attached of the nuts that we are using in the recipe. But what's happened with coconut sugar? With coconut sugar, if we do exactly the same recipe, that means that we have water, coconut sugar, and then we have nuts. It takes more time, the cooking process and the recrystallization of sugar. Why? Because in coconut sugar and also other sugars that are whole cane sugars, for example, we can have the same. Is that this process, it will take a little bit more time, okay? That means that we need to heat more time and mix more time in order to arrive to the same point of recrystallization. Why? Because there is glucose and fructose free in different percentage that give us this capacity to avoid the recrystallization or delay the capacity of sugar to recrystallize. Okay, and this is really interesting to understand because we can understand the reactions that we have in the recipes. Here, I already explained sugarcane, that we have many names. Refined white sugar is the white one, but then we have brown sugar, panela, muscovado, demerara, turbinado, this is in Spanish, molasses, and here it changes a little bit the composition. That means that these different names give us different kinds of sugar, and the variation will be the composition that we have about saccharose and then melasse, and know how much melasse we have inside. Okay, different sugars with different flavors also. Then if we move to coconut sap, it's the same that coconut sugar. The only thing is that coconut sap has a little bit of water inside. That means that the difference between the coconut sugar that I was explaining here in this part is that here we don't have water because it's just, I'm speaking about the coconut sugar that is in powder like this one, that are pieces, molecules, okay, like we can see here, that here there is no water here. But when we have coconut sap, we can have a percentage of water. Molecules of water, okay? That means that this water will participate in the recipe like water, and we will need to calculate the quantity of water and dry extract in order to balance our recipes. Maple syrup, exactly the same. Maple syrup is a mix of saccharose and also glucose and fructose. And maple syrup, the same like coconut sap, has in general around 20% of water. This can change a little bit. It depends what kind of producer we are going to use. If you want to check exactly how much water has your maple syrup, is just to take a refractometer and you put a small drop of maple syrup inside and you check with your refractometer. You will have Brix degrees. I'm sure that this will be around 80 Brix degrees, and this, it means that you have 20% of dry extract. Sorry, it means this 80 degrees of Brix is that you have 80% of dry extract in your maple syrup, and the rest 20% is water. Okay. Then we have, from the bees we have honey. Then from the fruits we have fructose. Okay, from the fruits we have fructose, and then milk sugar that we have in the dairy products is lactose. Here the difference is that lactose is really, the sweetness is really low. It's 0.15. Fructose is 1.45, the sweetness capacity, and lactose is 0.15. For this reason, in general, when we calculate and we formulate our recipes, when I'm using dairy products, even if I know that I have lactose inside as a sugar, I never calculate the sweetness, because the sweetness that gives me lactose and the proportion that we have in dairy products of lactose is really low and has a really low capacity to sweet our recipes. Okay, let's go to move here to the next part of the presentation. I'm just regarding, we have some questions that I will answer at the end, okay? And here you have a really interesting information that comes from the World Health Organization. This is something that always I explain in our courses, because in order to understand why we need to reduce sugars in pastry, first we need to understand the impact that they create in our body. For this reason, the first part of the presentation, you have a lot of information about this. But here in World Health Organization, what they tell us is that in general, they recommend to consume maximum 10%, ideally 5%, but maximum 10% of the quantity of calories that we consume in one day with sugar. This is a lot of sugar. It's 200 calories. 200 calories. A person like me that I have to consume 2,000 calories more or less per day, it means that my maximum per day of sugar added that I have to consume is around 50 grams. But what they recommend is to go maximum 5%. Okay, that means that the maximum of sugar that is better for me to consume per day, added sugar, not naturally present. Added sugar is like 25 grams, 25 grams per day. Okay, that means that this comes very fast, no? Because if I'm going to drink a coffee and I'm going to put a small sachet of sugar, no, this will be more or less here in Spain is between 5 to 7 grams. You have already 5 grams or 7 grams of sugar in your body. Then if you drink a Coca-Cola, for example, in Coca-Cola we have 17% of sugar, more or less. And you think, okay, 17 is not too much, but when we have 33 milliliters of Coke inside of a Coke, you are going to drink something like, let's go to calculate, this is because it's 17 per 3.3, no? That means that in one Coke we are going to consume 56 grams 56 grams of sugar. That means that just drinking one Coca-Cola, I'm in overconsumption of the sugars that the World Health Organization, they recommend us to consume. Okay, that means that, in general, this is, I think that is a global problem that we have, and we have to take care about this. And for this reason, in pastry, our responsibility is to try to adjust the sugar. I'm not just working in order to reduce the sugar for health, also in order to align for the experience that we have in the products. And I think that is interesting for us as a professional chef, that we need to take care about the experience, but also at the same time we need to take care about the customer, because we need our customer alive in order to come back to our business. Okay, that means that this is just an insight for you in order to understand that, okay, sugar is important for us, we need sugar for our experience, and this is something that we are not going to discuss, but just let's go to use the enough quantity that we need in its recipe. And by understanding the sugars, the function that they do, and the sweetness capacity that they have in order to adjust the quantity that we need to use for create the perfect experience, we can adjust the quantity that we have in our products, and like that try to reduce the quantity of sugar in general that we have in pastry products. Okay, there is a lot of pastry products that because these recipes they comes from old recipes and from old-fashioned, let's go to say, design or formulated recipes. They have a lot of sugar present, and what we do in a lot of recipes is just adjust this sweetness in order to have better experience and healthier product. Okay, just information for you in order to understand what is the general situation about sugar in the world. And here let's go to see alternative. For me, the most interesting, as you know, I'm sure, because always we are focusing fibers in pastry, because fibers is something really interesting. I just tell another time that go to the different webinars that we have speaking about the different fibers in pastry, because they are really interesting. And fibers give us a huge possibilities in pastry, because they have a really quantity of properties. Okay, that means that alternative in order to reduce sugar, because it's not always just remove the sugar. No, the sugar we can keep in the recipe in order to give a structure, give sweetness, but I'm sure that in a lot of recipes that we are producing without understanding, without conscience, without knowledge about the recipes, we can reduce the quantity of sugar, and the texture, the experience can be also really interesting. Okay, that means that when we want to reduce sugars in pastry, or when we want to remove sugars in pastry, we can use, for example, inulin, because inulin combined with the sugar helps us, for example, to reduce the sweetness. Okay, this is something that I repeat. We already explained it in our masterclass about fibers in pastry. Oligofructose is another ingredient that we can use. Really interesting. Why? Because inulin is almost 10 times less sweet than sugar, and oligofructose is around half sweet than sugar. That means that oligofructose helps us to keep the sweetness in our product, not the same, but similar sweetness with a little bit of reduction of sweetness, and oligofructose has similar water catchment capacity than sugar. That means that react a little bit in the same way. Inulin, no, inulin catches more water, and we have to balance the inulin, always playing with water in the recipe. That means that if I add, for example, too much fiber in one recipe, we can have the problem that we are going to dry the recipe. For this reason, by using inulin, always we have to be careful and balance how much fiber, how much inulin I add to my recipe, and just check, do we have enough water inside of my recipe to have this fiber hydrated? And we are going to feel the sensation and the flavor on the same direction, because if we have over quantity of fibers inside of our recipes, sometimes we feel dry texture or we can feel less the taste, okay? And this is something that with sugars, even if we use a lot of sugar, we don't have this problem. Then we have polyols, okay? Just to remember that fibers are prebiotics. This is something really interesting for health, no? And for this is another reason why always I tell to you that fibers are really interesting in pastry, not just for the control of water and not just for the capacities that they have in different directions, if not that they are a really good product for health. And for this reason, no, they have the function of prebiotic in our body that is also really interesting. Another point that is not in that presentation, but is in the presentation of inulin and fibers, is that World Health Organization always recommend that women needs to consume 25 grams of fiber and men around 35. And also this is another opportunity for us to use fibers in pastry in order to introduce fiber and explain to our customer that our product is rich, for example, in fiber, that this for marketing can be really interesting. Then we have polyols. Polyols, I'm not so fan about polyols. This is something that we explain in our Big Concept Extended online course. We never use in our on-site courses because I don't use too much. Why? Because they have aftertaste first. This is something that is really important for us as a pastry chef. That means that in general they have aftertaste, and also there is a lot of people that has problems in the digestion process. Even if they have low glycemic index, there is people that they cannot consume and they can have problems like diarrhea, for example, and gas. This is not so interesting. No? For this reason, I try to avoid for sure, xylitol, sorbitol, erythritol in general, I don't use. And when I want to work sugar-free, for example, in my recipes, I work. Now we are using allulose that it seems, we need time in order to discover this, but it seems that it's much better than polyols in our body. That means that allulose can be a really good, interesting substitute for sugar if you want to work with sugar-free recipes. And this is something that we explain in our course because we have a small online course in our webpage. You can go directly to the jordibordas.com and you will see in the online courses that we have a really small course that we create for sugar-free pastry. And here we explain allulose as a substitute for sugar. And what is interesting is that allulose is really simple to substitute. In general, in all the recipes like compotes, like creamies, like mousses, even like sponges, we can switch 1-to-1. That means that if I have 20% of sugar, I can put 20% of allulose. But the point is that allulose is less sweet than sugar. Sugar, if you remember, I explained it to you that 1% of sugar gives us 1 point of sweetness, and 1% of allulose gives us 0.7 of sweetness. That means that always by changing 1-to-1, we will have a reduction of sweetness. If we want to adjust this, we can use, for example, stevia. It's one possibility. The only thing is that stevia we can use in a really tiny percentage, less than 0.01 in our recipes in order to avoid the aftertaste that they have. Okay, that means that instead of use polyols, if we want to work in sugar-free direction, as I mentioned, we have allulose as one option, and the other option that I use also for the gluten-free pastry, when I want to work with products that they have lower glycemic index, what I do is to use oligofructose. Oligofructose also is interesting because has sweetening properties around 0.4, 0.5 if we compare to sugar that is 1, but also oligofructose caramelizes, like allulose also caramelizes, give us dry extract inside of the recipe also, give us stability, and doesn't have too much water catchment capacity. It's like similar to sugar. The only thing is that it's a fiber, and fiber also, there is people that they cannot consume too much, no? There is a lot of people in our courses that they ask me, no, how much fiber you can introduce in one pastry product, no? And my answer always is it depends the customer. The people that is used to consume fiber every day, no, that means that they eat a lot of vegetable, whole bread, fruits in general. It means that they consume more than 20 or 30 grams of fiber per day. These people, in general, we can give them inulin, we can give them oligofructose, other fibers, and always they will feel perfect. But the people that they are not used to consume fiber, the problem will be exactly the same than polyalcohols, no? Like, for example, xylitol, erythritol, or maltitol, that can be in the same direction. And this is because they don't consume enough fiber per day, no? That means that this kind of person, no, imagine that one day you are going to work with fibers and you have one customer that comes to your shop and tell, wow, the other day I was consuming one of your products and I have no gas in my stomach and I had diarrhea and I'm not feeling so well, and this is because this person cannot consume too much fiber, okay? Just be careful in order to avoid the overconsumption of fiber when you have people like that, customers like that. It's something that we never know. We have to give them to taste and just discover. Since long time, we are doing courses, no? This is our 10th anniversary this year of our school, and since long time, no, I think that 6 or 7 years, we are using fibers in pastry, and never had problems with one of our participants in our courses with this problem, okay? That means that sometimes we can find, but it's really rare, okay? That means that for the substitution of sugar, fibers, really interesting. Polyols, also interesting, but not like the best option from my point of view, because this is my opinion, please. Then we have allulose, also like an opportunity. And the only thing is that we have to keep in mind that allulose is not allowed to use still in Europe, but other countries in Asia, US, South America, all these countries, we can use without problems. In general, that means that this is a really good opportunity in order to reduce sugar, because sometimes we can work with this product in team, no? Or we can just remove sugar and substitute 1-to-1 oligofructose or allulose per sugar in our recipes. And then we have high intensity sweeteners, no? Here we have the stevia, we have the saccharin, we have the aspartame, we have also the sucralose, okay, it's the one that sometimes we use. I'm working, if I need this, I work with a little bit stevia, not too much because it has aftertaste, and this gives us also a really bad experience for the customer. That means that if I want a push, I can use a little bit, and what I do in general is to use in natural. What we do when we need to produce products like that is just we blend the leaf of stevia, and we put a really tiny percentage in our recipe. We start, for example, in 0.0 or 0, let's go to say 0.1% in our recipe, and we blend and we taste. If we have aftertaste of the stevia, we reduce the quantity, okay, until we have a little bit of sweet sensation, but not too much or not aftertaste. And another possibility that is really interesting about the leaf is just make an infusion. We can put this in water, just make an infusion, and then remove the leaf and use this water inside of our recipes in order to create this, to enhance the sweet sensation without using too much sugar in our recipes. And then we have another example that I use when I need a perfect clean aftertaste, that is sucralose. I'm not super fan because it's not super healthy product, but for the quantity that we can use in the recipe in order to enhance the sweet sensation of our recipe can be interesting and can be a product that is not super aggressive, okay? Sucralose, it's like 600 times more sweet than sugar. That means that in general, we start by using in our recipes 0.01, that this is something like 6 points of sweetness in our recipe. Okay? That means that 0.01 is a really tiny percentage of sucralose on our recipe. And this I use only when I have products, for example, for diabetic people, that I really want to remove all the sugars, and I want to keep the stability, the structure by using, for example, allulose or oligofructose, but I want to increase a little bit the sweet sensation in order to have a similar experience like sugar. And we can just formulate recipes in that direction that they will have exactly the same sweet sensation than sugar, and you have a perfect clean aftertaste that is really interesting for the experience for the customer. Okay, that's it. Until here we have the presentation that we prepared. ¿Quién hora es, Ramón? Perfect. That means that let's go to start with the questions, no? And Ramón is going to share with me the questions. Thank you, Erika, for your question. Thank you very much. What about erythritol and agave syrup? As I mentioned, erythritol I'm not super fan because erythritol has a lot of aftertaste, and also we did a lot of tests because this ingredient is an ingredient that we explain in our B-Concept online extended course, and we have some recipes. And for example, in erythritol, we have the problem that recrystallizes very fast. No, that means that when you are going to prepare a meringue, we have to heat the meringue a little bit and higher the temperature in order to be sure that will be melted, for example, for a French meringue. And then in the recipes, we find a lot of problems because loses the binding capacity a little bit. No? That means that erythritol we are not using too much for this reason, mainly for the aftertaste and then for the reactions that we have in the recipe. And then if you try to check a little bit the information that you have from different papers, that they explain to you that erythritol is not one of the best options for health. That means that for this reason we decided just to remove and use other options that we know that for the moment we think that are safer and healthier, that are oligofructose, one option. If the person that is going to consume the product can consume fiber, okay, oligofructose is a really good, interesting option because we have a glycemic index that is low. And then, as I mentioned, allulose, okay, that has low calories. I'm not remember what direction, but low calories and low glycemic index. And then agave syrup, we have to be careful because agave syrup is really rich in fructose. And fructose also is not a super healthy product. No, this is the problem that we have, for example, in US, that a lot of beverages, they are sweet by using high corn fructose syrup, and the fructose goes directly to the liver and transforms something like that in fat mainly, no? In sugars also, but fat in our blood. No? That means that give us in our body, this is transformed to our body in obesity, for example. No? For this reason, agave, we have to be careful, no? Because it's also rich in fructose, and we can consume for sure, but in a small quantities. Okay? If I want to move to a sugar-free recipe, I prefer to move directly to oligofructose and allulose for the moment. From my experience. Okay. Thank you very much, Erika, for your question. Let's go to the next one. Just, Erika, tell me what country you are, where are you come from? Because I want to understand if you can use allulose or not, okay? Leila, thank you very much for your question. What is the sweetening power of dates, sugar, and maple syrup? Wow, this is a super challenge for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check with my team, with Pamela, we will check this exactly because I don't remember. Maple syrup I have here. I'm going to tell right now. Just give me 1 second because we prepared it here, I think, just maple syrup. No, it's 0.65. That means that maple syrup is less sweet than saccharose. Date sugar, we have to check because date sugar is a mix of saccharose, glucose and fructose and fiber. Okay, that means that I think that will be less sweet than saccharose, but I'm not sure. Will be something really similar to saccharose inverted sugar. Will be something like that. Okay, that means that let me check with my team in order to have the right information about date sugars. Maple syrup is around 0.65, the sweetness capacity. Okay, the sweetening power. Perfect. Thank you, Leila, for your question. I'm in Portugal, Erika. Okay, there is no problem. You can use, because we are using allulose, there is, if you go to Google, you will find even different pages that they sell allulose. Even I think that Amazon is selling allulose. The only thing is that if you are going to commercialize, we are not allowed to commercialize this product to our customers, no? But in the future, we will see. Just living in Portugal, the option that you have that is really interesting is allulose, is oligofructose that you can find in the Sosa company, for example, that they sell oligofructose in powder, and this is what we can use as a substitution of sugar in our recipes, and in healthier, in a healthier direction is a really interesting product, okay, interesting ingredient. Okay, let's go. Hello, Edita. Can we replace sucrose with coconut sugar? Yes, for sure. You can go one-to-one. No? The only thing is that coconut sugar has different color and has different sweetening power, a little bit different, but not too much. And then the aftertaste, because coconut sugar, when they prepare, they cook the sap, and here we have a process of caramelization. Okay, that means that if we are going to replace sugar one-to-one per coconut sugar, we can work in that direction. It will work. The only thing is that, as I mentioned, we have to be careful because we have glucose and fructose inside, and this has anti-crystallization properties. That means that maybe it depends what kind of recipe. This can change. And also here, I can tell to you that coconut sugar, for example, when we add in a meringue, that we are used to work with coconut sugar, that we are used to use white sugar, and we change for coconut sugar. Coconut sugar has a little bit of salt, and this salt weaks the proteins of the egg whites. For this reason, if you are going to prepare a meringue, that is really interesting, to prepare a meringue with coconut sugar, just keep in mind that add albumin, the protein from the egg whites inside of your meringue can be interesting in order to reinforce the quantity of protein, and like that, the salt that we have in coconut sugar is not going to weak your proteins, and your meringue is going to be stable and not fall down. This is not always happen with all the coconut sugars. It depends the producer and where comes from the coconut sugar that sometimes has salt inside, and salt is really a big enemy of the proteins in the egg whites. And the way to solve really easy, just to put more egg white protein inside of our meringue. You can start by adding 5% of egg white protein in powder from the quantity of egg whites that you have on your recipe, and then if you see that it's not stable, you can add a little bit more by the experience, and that's it. I have read that coconut sugar absorbs a bit more water than sucrose. Yes, sure. This is because we have glucose and fructose, and glucose has the ability to absorb more water than saccharose, than sucrose alone, and than fructose. Okay, that means that for sure you are right in the right information, right direction. Okay, by substituting one sugar to another, will you need to calibrate the dry extract percentage as well? No. If you work with the same kind of sugar, I mean the same dry extract in your sugar. No. For example, if I'm working in white sugar and I move to work with coconut sugar, the dry extract is exactly the same. The point is that sometimes we are using sugar, white sugar, and we introduce, for example, maple syrup. And here in maple syrup, we have water and sugar. Okay, that means different sugars in the composition of the dry part of the maple syrup. That means that here, yes, we will need to check the dry extract of our recipes and just check if there is a big difference, no? But also it depends how much percentage we are going to use of that ingredient in our recipe. Sometimes by using sugar and moving to maple syrup, for example, or you can find even tupinambo syrup in some countries in the world, and by changing 1-to-1, if they are not big proportions in the recipes, we can switch 1-to-1 and in general it works. But if you want to work on the right direction, what we do is to check the difference in dry extract and see if we need to adjust the recipe on the formulation side, okay? What means sugar crystallization? Thank you, Elena, for your question, okay? Sugar crystallization. Sugar, no, when we see here, it's crystallized. That means that, no, this sugar is molecules of glucose and fructose that they are crystallized, okay? What's happened? In some recipes, no, sugar, sucrose, or for example, lactose, when we mix with water, they are going to just become completely liquid, okay? And they will be in dissolution inside of the water that we have in the recipe. But what happens? Sometimes, if this water is missing or they keep long time, for example, in the freezer, the sugars, they come back to the recrystallization inside of the recipe, they come back to recrystallize. That means that they come back to this state. And you have like microcrystals of saccharose that with the time, no, inside of the freezer, even in the freezer, because in the freezer we have a proportion of water that is freeze, but not all the water in one product of pastry inside of the freezer is frozen, okay? That means that sugar can move little by little, and sugar has the capacity to recrystallize. What's happened? When we add glucose, for example, or we add fructose inside of our recipes, no, by using directly glucose and fructose or by using coconut sugar, because coconut sugar contains glucose and fructose naturally present. This glucose and fructose, what they do is just to avoid this process. No, that means that they delay the capacity of the sugar, sucrose, saccharose to recrystallize and come back to these textures of crystals. Okay? For this reason, we speak about crystallization of sugar. No? Crystallization of sugar or recrystallization, because we come back to the crystallization of sugar, is that process, and we use, no, in pastry different sugars like glucose and fructose molecules in order to avoid this process. Thank you very much for your question, Elena. What we do, this is a really interesting question. Takume, thank you very much. What software we are using in our formulation? When we use in the school, in our internal work, we have a software that is called BPro. This is a license from Comisoft in France. You can just go directly to our website. And here you will find, I'm not sure where now with Ramon, we are trying to check, yes, here in shop. And you can see that the kind of software, now Ramon is going to share with you the link. We use this software, this is a professional software that gives us a lot of information, give us the quantity of dry extract, give us the sweetness that we have inside of the recipe, give us what kind of fats, what quantity of fats we have inside of the recipes, helps us to control and calculate the cost, give a lot of information, okay? And this is the software that we use inside of our school. But when you come to our courses, in order to learn formulation, here we don't use any software. We start by using paper and just a pen. Why? Because at the beginning, when we start to create recipes from scratch and when we need to understand the function of the molecules, ingredients, techniques, and the formulation side that we explained with the concept method, we have to start with a white paper because we need you to understand how it works formulation. Then when you understand in paper, no, that means that we start, for example, analyzing the main ingredient. We introduce the techniques. We balance the intensity of flavor by doing tests of flavor. And then we introduce the different ingredients of each technique. No? For example, if we have emulsion, we understand that we need one emulsifier. Okay, we analyze different emulsifiers, egg yolks, dairy products, or we use, no, for example, natural mold from Sosa Company, that is a fiber that has emulsion properties. And what we do is to analyze in that technique what ingredient we need, and the other ingredients in an emulsion for sure will be water and will be fat. Okay, that means that we do the construction of the recipe, and then we analyze quantity of dry extract, sweetness, fat, and other parameters in order to understand if we are in the right direction. And then we make a test. That means that we do a test, we create the first recipe, we prepare this recipe, we freeze and thaw, and if it works at the first time, perfect, but in general needs to be adjusted. It depends where you are going to use or what kind of texture we have from the beginning, and sometimes needs to be softer, needs to be harder, and all this process is what we explain in our courses when we explain the concept method. No, it's the same in online or the same in on-site course. No, the methodology is exactly the same. The only thing is that the courses that you come to our school in live, here in 4 days, we are focused only in the formulation side, and we are really focused just to formulate, make a test, freeze, thaw, you taste, and in 4 days we create like 40 recipes, more or less between 30 to 40 recipes from scratch that we do all the process. And in the online part, because we have long time, we have like 9-month course that each week you are going to work with one different topic, and we go by starting by explaining the molecules, then techniques, then formulation, and you have a lot of products that we show you how to produce, and we explain the function of each ingredient and all these products. Okay, that means that in recipe formulation, internal in the school, we use this software, Vpro, that is the same license in France that is Comisoft. This is our friend that created this software that works amazing. I can recommend to you to use it. It doesn't matter if you contact Comisoft or us in order to have it. And then in our school, just paper, pen, and you need your mind, learn, understand, and make the recipes, make the tests, and just understand what's happened in our recipes. For example, when we freeze and thaw, or when they need more creaminess, or they are not enough stable, for example, because we have water leaking out. Okay, let's go to the next question. So I'm going to drink a little bit of water. Thank you, Elena. Another time for your question. I'm Pastry, and I'm trying to have low sugar. I understand to consume low quantity of sugar, but I start to replace white sugar with brown sugar. That means that it's much healthier. My dessert, no, if you change 1 to 1, it's more or less the same. The only thing is a little bit better to use brown sugar. Why? Because in brown sugar, if it's good quality brown sugar, you have a little bit of vitamins and minerals, okay? But in the healthy direction, for me, it means also reduction of sugar, no? It's not just substitute and use whole sugars. That is really interesting. If you switch also flour for, instead of your refined flour, you use whole flour. It doesn't matter what kind of flour, but whole flour is also interesting because we have vitamins, minerals, and we have fats that are really interesting for health directions. But in general, when we switch 1 to 1, it's not just this. For me, it's really important, the reduction. And then the next step is to add fiber. Why? Because fiber delays the sugar absorption in our blood of the sugar glucose that we have in the pastry products. No? That means that if we have saccharose, no, or brown sugar alone in one product we are going to consume, and this sugar is going to go directly, no, really fast, maybe in 10, 20 minutes, to our blood levels and is going to increase glucose in our bloodstream. And when we have fiber, this process, it delays and it rises less. That means that it's much better for our body because it's stress less. No, our body needs to create less insulin, and like that, the balancing of our glucose in our body is much more, let's go to say, balance. Okay, that means that it's good, but it's not the best option. It's not the only option, let's go to say. That means that brown sugar is okay, then whole sugar, it's in whole flours is interesting, and then just try to reduce sugar by using fibers inside of your recipes. It will help you also in your recipes to have healthier options. Okay, let's go to the next question. If we have recipe for raspberry coulis, no, thank you, Beer the Lime. I'm not sure that this is your name, but anyway, thank you very much. If we have a recipe for raspberry coulis, and which includes sugar and glucose syrup, no, water, fruit puree, etc., can we replace glucose syrup for inulin? Yes, you can replace, and this glucose, if we replace for inulin, I understand that it's not a high percentage in your recipe. It will help you to give us a little bit the same consistency, because glucose has water catchment capacity. Inulin has more water catchment capacity. That means that the texture can be a little bit more thick, no, more. We will have a little bit more viscosity. The only thing is that glucose gives us shiny finishing in our product, more shiny finishing, and it depends what quantity of inulin, no, how much percentage of inulin you are going to use. Inulin can give us a matte finishing. Just try, because you have sugar anyway, and sugar gives us shiny. That means that try to work sugar and glucose, you substitute per inulin. If you have the less than 10% of glucose in your recipe, I think that inulin is going to work anyway on the same direction. And this will be a healthier option. Why? Because you have the same sugar, but you added fiber to your recipe that is going to delay the speed of the glucose to arrive to the blood levels, okay, in our body. And also raspberry is rich in fiber. That means that we have fiber from the raspberries and inulin added. That means that this product, if it doesn't have too much sugar, it's just not super healthy, but it's not really aggressive for our body. Okay, let's go for the next question. Thank you, Marvin, for your question. I have been seeing in some recipes for entremets mousse, the crème anglaise is made with glucose instead of sugar. Why is glucose used? First, in general, I never use crème anglaise. Since 10 years, I just forget to use crème anglaise in our recipes, because what we do is when we formulate the recipes, we work directly in emulsion in our recipes, and that means that when I use egg yolks, I can use egg yolks directly in my recipe, that they are pasteurized, and I don't need to cook the crème anglaise. That means that I go faster to the emulsion capacity in my recipe, and I avoid to prepare crème anglaise. For me, if I analyze classic crème anglaise and I have 2 or 3% of glucose instead of sugar, doesn't mean a big difference. What will be the difference in the final recipe? Because in the crème anglaise, it's almost the same, no? The only thing is that it depends what percentage we are speaking here, because if we have like 2 or 3% of sugar and we switch to glucose, there is not too much things that change. But it depends where you are going to use this crème anglaise. By adding glucose in your crème anglaise, what is interesting is that you have anti-crystallization properties, okay? For example, imagine that I'm going to make a white chocolate mousse, and I'm going to use crème anglaise in order to introduce the emulsion capacity in this white chocolate mousse. White chocolate is a product that has a lot of sugar and has also lactose that comes from the milk powder that they use on the production of white chocolate or milk chocolate. Okay, that means that this glucose is going to avoid the recrystallization. Even if we have 2 or 3%, is more than enough in the final recipe. This glucose is going to avoid the recrystallization of lactose and saccharose that we have in this kind of chocolates. And for this reason can be interesting. Also, it's interesting to use glucose because it has lower sweetening capacity. Remember, saccharose, sucrose is 1%, 1 point of sweetness, and glucose in general, it depends what kind of glucose you are going to use. 1% of glucose is 0.4. That means that glucose is a little bit less sweet than saccharose. But for me, the reason in order to use glucose in the crème anglaise is just if then we use ingredients like praline, like white chocolate, like milk chocolate, like dark chocolate that they have sugar inside, with this small quantity of glucose we will avoid the recrystallization of sugar and will preserve better the structure. If we need to freeze, for example, long time, like 2 or 3 months, will be better. Okay, I think it's in that direction, Marvin. I hope that this helps you. Thank you for your question. Elena, thank you so much. I will have your online sugar course to learn how to use fibers. Fibers, in that course, in the online sugar-free course, what we explain is substitutes like oligofructose, like allulose, and also yacon syrup in order to replace them for sugar in our recipes, okay? If you are very interested in the healthy direction, you have a lot of webinars in our channel in YouTube, in Jordi Bordas YouTube channel, and here you have a lot of information and a lot of information for free that I hope that it will help you. And just remember that we have our 2 main courses, that are the Big Concept online extended course, that is a course that is a really long-term course that is 14-month connection, and during 9 months we explain and you have guide training where we explain molecules in pastry, we explain techniques, we explain the formulation side of Big Concept method step by step, how to create recipes from scratch, from white paper, adapted to your needs. And like that, you can understand what are your needs and create the recipes aligned to you and your customers, because it's part of the whole needs to adjust the recipes in your direction. And if you want to work totally free and with independence, you have this course that is really, really interesting. And the next month of June, we will start with a new edition. And also we have our Big Concept on-site course. If you want to come to Barcelona one day, to Viladecans, to our city, to our school, and learn directly, you have dates in our webpage. You can visit just jordibordas.com and just check the online and the on-site courses that we have in our school. Thank you very much for your time. We are going to finish here. If you want just to follow our webinars, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hope to see you soon in the next masterclass. Bye bye, have a lovely day. Kiss you, bye bye.